Welcome to growthtofreedom.com, the show that brings you inspiration, transformation, and leadership. We're helping you connect the dots, see the blind spots, and get unstuck so you can go out and generate more leads, more sales, more profits. More importantly, so you can go out and have a bigger reach, a bigger impact, and make a bigger contribution.
Hi, it's Paul Durante, and welcome. We have a very good friend on the program today. His name is Dan Kuschell. I love his bio. When you go to his website, dankuschell.com, that's DANKUSCHELL.com. The first thing he says, Dan Kuschell is a husband, dad, serial entrepreneur, and angel investor. I love that you start with husband and dad because I know how valuable family is to you. So good on you for opening up your bio like that, Dan, and welcome to the program.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Paul.
So, Dan, I think I'm going to be a little bit complimentary to begin because I'm a fan of you and I'm a fan of what you do. And I think at the end of our days, if people could say what I'm about to say about you at the end of our lives, I think we would have lived a good life. I think you're a cool guy.
Thank you.
I know that you have had an extraordinary entrepreneurial journey. And by the way, this is the last two Ultimate Entrepreneur shows. We have featured an organization that you know a lot about, the Genius Network, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And I do want to talk about the last two episodes of the Ultimate Entrepreneur because you were there, Joe Polish and Tony Robbins and Peter Diamandis. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about your history. Serial entrepreneur, you built 11 companies. The first one in 1992. You got your start in direct mail. You worked with and consulted health clubs. You've done all kinds of media. You've got your own show now. We'll talk about that in a little bit. You've been on NBC, Spike TV, History Channel, ESPN, a lot more. You are an expert at helping people build and grow their companies. This program, The Ultimate Entrepreneur, it's inspirational, it's aspirational, it's educational. Along your entrepreneurial journey way, you had something happen that was very, very unique. You had a health scare, so let's start there. 2009, take us back.
Yeah, at that time, I was running 5 companies, Paul.
5?
Yes. I had about 175 to 200 employees in multiple offices. And, I was a type A entrepreneur. When you're in your 30s, I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but I know I did. I felt like I was invincible. And, I was working day and night, probably at close to 20 hours a day. And I was sleeping on average 2 to 4 hours a night and had done that for about a decade and was building up these companies. And my son was born. And 2 weeks after he was born, Paul, I woke up one day with tightness in my chest. One thing led to another. I ended up rushing myself to the hospital. I walked in. I said, I'm having some tightness. They took a couple tests. Next thing you know, all hell breaks out. I end up on a gurney. They put all the diodes on me, and I end up staying in the hospital for 4 days. I ended up on the third day signing a disclaimer that said I had a 1 in X chance of dying on the table, and it scared the hell out of me. And it was a wake-up call, an evaluation. As a dad, right, we think of being there for our kids. And for me, the thought of being a dad that worked so hard and then lost my health and even the possibility of that, just really took the wind out of my sails. And I remember I was awake up all night writing what I thought might be my last will to my wife at the time. And, I was crying literally like a baby, like, what am I going to do? And then, I went through, there's the stages of DABDAR that are talked in Kubler-Ross's book, denial, anger, bargaining, anxiety, response, and then acceptance. And I went through all of those stages, I think, in just a handful of hours. And then I got to a place of, okay, when I come out, and I'm sure at one point, Paul, I remember going, God, if I come out of this, I'm going to be different. And I started thinking about what that different would be for me. And what that did, Paul, is I came out of it. I said, I'm going to do things different. And I started really getting clear for me. Everything I do today is based on these 3 questions, which started that time in the hospital, that 4 days, which is, what do I want? What do I stand for? And who am I as a person? And if you're doing this new for the first time, asking those 3 questions, just as I throw them out there right now, without a lot of thought, you say, oh, that'd be easy. But when you sit down and really try to get conscious and go, okay, what do I really want? Not what does my wife want, not what do my kids want, not what do those couple hundred employees want. What do I want? And then who am I really? Take the labels away, take the entrepreneur label away, the CEO label, the dad label, the husband label, take all those labels away and like strip it away. Who are you as a person, your character, your qualities? And then the last one, which is what do I stand for, which are the values. And for me, Paul, what I decided to do through Genius Network, I had been in the Genius Network community for about 5 years and, had grown my businesses exponentially. And I reached back into the community and say, hey, does anybody know some contacts of how to set up your company to sell it? And so for me, I decided to sell my companies.
All 5.
And about 2 years later, Paul, I had set the stage to be able to do just that. I sold the companies, and it allowed me then to focus on my health. I lost 60 pounds, which I've still continued to keep that off. I was able to be a full-time dad for a great while, and then only work on fun, independent projects. And then, that led me, Joe, when you're on his radar, Paul, as you probably know, and I know Jay's a big fan of Joe's, Joe is one of the most generous people, and once you get on his radar, you're just on his radar. So it seemed like he would check in on me every now and then and go, hey, Dan, is everything all right? Is there anything you need? And I came back into the community, and one of the members actually, you said, what are you doing, Dan? I'm like, well, I'm working on fun, independent projects, being a dad, and get my health in order. And he said, have you ever thought about teaming up with Joe? And I had it, but I was such an ambassador for Joe. I obviously believed in what he stood for because of being in the community for 5 years. And so we ended up having a discussion. That discussion lasted about 6 months, admittedly, Paul, because as you know, when you bring some entrepreneurs together, sometimes you have to work on, it's not the things you usually say to each other, it's the things you don't say that can get you in trouble. So we had a 6-month conversation. Long story short, we ended up teaming up together about 4 years ago, and we've had this, ride of growth and, being able to go out and make a difference and contribution and so on. So it's been a lot of fun.
It's an incredible journey, and I got to say, I got goosebumps when, I've heard the story in the past. You've told me the story in the past, but, to be so close, it's humbling, is it not?
Oh, yes. I mean, as the old saying goes, you can have everything, but they take your health away. What do you really have? And for me, I got to look at that right in the mirror firsthand. And, again, thinking about it from my kids' point of view, people talk about what is your legacy? What do you want it to be? And it's weird to even sometimes think about that question, but for me, it's simply being a leader for my kids, and everything else is a strategic byproduct. And the thought that, I would be this, business person who focused all my time on building it, which I did. I sacrificed my family time, personal time, all these different things for what? And at the end of the day, today, I realized that you can have it both ways. You can have a quality of life, and you can have a quantity of life if you define it and take the time to do it.
So the last couple of shows, the last couple of Ultimate Entrepreneur shows, we have featured an event that you were at. It was a Genius Network event. Before we talk about the event, let's talk about the Genius Network, Joe Polish. Give us the 2-minute version. Who's Joe Polish and what is the Genius Network? And how do you play a role?
Great question. So what Genius Network does, what Joe's does, the short version is Joe's mission and goal is to reduce suffering for entrepreneurs. And that shows up a lot of different ways. And the way we do that is we work to show entrepreneurs, Paul, how to build an else business that's easy, lucrative, and fun, right? That's the acronym, versus a half business, one that is hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. So we have a lot of strategy, wisdom. We've gotten known for 3 key things: connections to otherwise inaccessible experts not available anywhere else, the way Joe facilitates and brings them together. Collaboration. Jay even says, he's been doing high-profile events for 4 decades. I believe, I might misinterpret it a little bit, but I believe I've heard Jay say that our community is the only one he's ever seen, including his own, that brings this type of entrepreneur, high-level, high-achieving entrepreneur together where they show up and they get to be both the beneficiary and the benefactor. In other words, the student and the teacher at the same time. So it's highly collaborative, and then also based on contribution, where people are really focused on being a 10 times person, not just a 10% person, or they're more interested in being someone of transformation versus someone that's transactional.
It's not cheap to join.
No, it's $25,000 a year to participate in the group. The minimum requirement is to do at least $1 million a year in revenue. And our average actually in the community runs a business doing about $9 million a year. They all have an affinity, Paul, for building this else model versus half. And that shows up not only in marketing, which Joe is known for, and of course Jay is a preeminent expert at, but also things like sales or things like operations, things of finance. So it's about building and having an affinity to creating an ELF model instead of a half model. Or Peter Diamandis, who was on the most recent episode, he talks about its multiplication by subtraction. Or I've heard Tony say that, business really has two functions, which I think is a quote from Peter Drucker directly, which is, there's only two functions in business: marketing, innovation. Everything else is a cost, right? And so we bring people in this community together to really get their next strategic breakthroughs, to be able to get, find those blind spots, if you will, and develop and deepen new relationships for strategic partnerships, joint ventures, and deal making. It's really a great place to be.
Jay and I are huge fans of Genius Network, and you're right about what Jay has said about Genius Network. So let's say I've got an extra $25,000. I'm elite in my field of expertise, and I want to join. Tell us the process. Tell us, if I phone you up and say, hey, I got 25 grand, I want in. It's not that easy, right?
Yeah, we have an application process, which if, someone that, has the criteria or feel they're ready to look into the group. Actually, for many people, our annual event may be a better starting point to get a feel for the community. It's the one time a year, Paul, that we open up the community to the public. It's also by application. It also requires a minimum annual run rate of $1 million or more a year. But someone can go and learn more at geniusnetworkevents.com. It's geniusnetworkevents.com. Or if you are interested in looking at our 25K group, as our members call it, Genius Network, you can go to 25kgroup.com and get more information there.
And tell us a little bit, just before we take a quick break, tell us a little bit more about Joe Polish, because he's iconic in a lot of different circles. But for those people who've never heard of Joe or who may be unfamiliar with his work, tell us a little bit about Joe.
Well, Joe is the most generous person I know of in business. And who he is front stage is also who he is backstage. Like, have you ever met people, Paul, that you go see them and they're great front stage, and then you go behind the stage with them and it's like, wow, that's a different person that was just up there, right? Joe is what you see up front is also what you see in back, and he's transparent, he's honest, right? There's 8 values we have in our company that I feel that Joe demonstrates, and these are adapted from Dan Sullivan, the 5 ways you get paid. But appreciation in the relationship on both sides, enhancement in the relationship that grows, utilizing the relationship so you can be proud of, utilizing each other's things. The referability factor, is it easy to refer somebody? And then the multiplier impact financially. So when you get together, does it grow and appreciate? And then the next 3 values are desire to learn and grow. Joe is the most curious human being I've met besides me. I think I strive to learn and grow a lot. I'm an incredible student of business marketing, growing and scaling companies. But Joe takes the cake, times 10. So he's an insatiable curiosity and desire to learn and grow, which is one of the values. The other 2 are anticipating needs. So Joe is someone who provides value in advance, Paul, usually before he's ever asked. And in fact, he goes out of his way to provide value before really beginning the relationship. That's why he has ilovemarketing.com with over 200 hours of some of the best marketing wisdom and advice in the world. And because many people get all that value ahead of time, it makes it easy for them potentially to be a part of Genius Network or the Genius Network event process. So it's desire to learn and grow, anticipating needs, as well as the ability to be resourceful. Let's face it, as entrepreneurs, right? You and I, as entrepreneurs, we have to be some of the most resourceful people in the world. Entrepreneurs, what is entrepreneurship? It's adding value. It's seeing things that others don't see. And Joe has a unique way of being able to see in their business from a multiplying impact or a marketing impact or a selling impact, things that they don't see. And one of the frameworks he's got is, figuring out a way to can and clone yourself, which ties in with that ELF versus half model. So those are a few. I could go on, but those are a handful of the things that pop up for me with Joe.
And and the podcast, I Love Marketing, is just a phenomenal product. So when we get back, because we're talking to Dan Kuschell right now, and he is a brilliant business growth strategist. We're back with Dan in a second. Amerifactors, AMERIFACTORS.com. Stop waiting 30, 60, or 90 days to get paid on invoices. Turn those invoices into immediate working capital through factoring. Use the funds to make payroll, to hire new staff, to buy equipment, or to go after new customers. Factoring is not a loan, and there is nothing to pay back. If your customer can't pay, Amerifactors takes the loss, not you. It's based on your customer's credit, not yours. so bad credit and bankruptcy are okay. They've been in business since 1990 and have funded over $5 billion to businesses. Amerifactors, Amerifactors.com.
He's the $9 billion man.
It's your boy.
888-12345. The world's preeminent business growth expert, Jay Abraham.
Hi, it's Paul Durante. We're with Dan Kuschell from the Genius Network. Dan, you're a brilliant business growth strategist. So what is the number one strategy for growing a business?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Is there just one?
Give us your top three.
Yeah, well, I think I'll start with a question, right? Like, as I look at business, it's really asking the question, what's the most productive thing that I can do in every moment? Or what's the most productive thing that my team can do in every moment? I think if we start there, that's just a great framework of which to build. You cut out a lot of the noise and a lot of the friction. That simple question, I feel there's a lot of wisdom that lives there, overall. One of the things that pops up, right, is, the quote I shared that I heard from Tony Robbins originally, which is a Peter Drucker quote, that, business has two functions. It's marketing, innovation, and everything else is a cost. I've heard Dan Sullivan of Strategic Coach, who we do a lot with in Genius Network. He's been a part of our community for 5 years. It's marketing, innovation, and teamwork. And I think as I look at business today, Paul, if you look at it, like marketing, people ask me, like, what is marketing? And I believe marketing is everything in business. It's not just one thing. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about marketing, and it gets a bad rap sometimes. And done wrong, it's justified. But done right, it's like one of the most eloquent, most elegant things that we can actually do. And I think Jay is, probably the best in the world at being able to really talk about marketing in a professional, elegant way. Overall, marketing shows up in operations done right? Because there's a before unit, a during unit, and an after unit experience. Starbucks is a great example. What makes Starbucks great is not necessarily the coffee it makes. It's the experience around getting that coffee. And, business really operates the same way. So coming back, what's the most productive thing that I can do right now? What's the most productive thing my team can do right now? I think is a great place to be thinking all the time.
We talk about marketing, but what about the other side, or, the 1A, 1B? What about selling? What is selling?
To me, selling is nothing more than being a servant leader. And, how do I serve is really the question that selling addresses. Dan Sullivan has a great definition of selling, which goes something like this. Hopefully I get it right, which is, selling is getting someone intellectually involved in a future result that is good for them. So
Wow.
that they can emotionally commit to take action to achieve that result. So getting someone intellectually involved in a future result that's good for them so that they can emotionally commit to take action to achieve it, right? We've all heard that people buy emotionally and justify logically. This is one of the most eloquent ways that I think we could describe it. So selling is serving people. Marketing, people say, well, what is the difference between marketing and selling? Marketing, as I've heard Joe say regularly, marketing is what you do to get someone on the phone or face-to-face with you, where they're pre-positioned, pre-motivated, pre-interested, and ready to do business with you. And selling is what you do when you get them on the phone or face-to-face with you. Marketing, as it relates, is storytelling, right, in its simplest form. Those companies, those people, those industries that can tell a better story and package a better story around what they do to deliver it are the ones who win. It's education-based, by the way. People frequently ask Paul, they go, what's the difference today with marketing versus, say, 10 years ago? I think people are smarter today. On a recent interview you did with Pam Danzinger, she did a great job. I think it was show number 45. She talked about Henry's, right? Going into the market between $100,000 and $250,000, right, where it's over 20 million consumers in North America. And, really getting into how they feel. It's about understanding how they feel, which is tying in with marketing. What is storytelling, or even the sales experience that you create? Look at it. Another way to look at it. Look at the difference between a $1 bill and a $100 bill. At its simplest core, right? If you take the two and you put them up to each other, they're the same exact size, aren't they? They're the same weight. They're the same weight, right?
Yep.
They're the same color ink. The only difference between the two is the message on the paper. It's the story. It's the only difference. And when we can get better at telling a $100 story or a $1,000 story or more exponentially from there versus a $1 story, that's when our business can grow and when it can change. So those are a couple ideas that pop up for me.
You are intellectually stimulating when talking about entrepreneurship, sales, marketing, business growth. This is fascinating. I'm taking notes copiously. Why do you say that referral strategies are not your best source of business? Because so many people rely on them heavily, but you say they're not your best source.
Well, first of all, good marketing is creating a lead-in, right?
Well said.
So one, you create a controversy, you get people's attention. So my thought around referral strategy, it's more of a psychology thing. Like what I feel today more than anything, all marketing also is applied psychology. And so as I think about the millennial generation, why I say that referral strategies are not your best source of business is not 100% accurate, but it's not inaccurate as well. And why I say that is this. I think if we're thinking in terms, even going back to your Pam Danzinger interview, she talked about the company out of Detroit, Shinola, and how they get these Henrys, high earning net worth individuals who are not rich yet, right?
Yep.
To buy into their service is because of the experience and how they feel. And thinking of those millennials, those people that are buying into that experience. In my mind, when someone says marketing, what do? Do they lean in or they pull away? I think they pull away naturally from a psychology. When you say the word selling, do people lean in or do they usually pull away?
Pull away.
Well, mostly pull away. Like I've heard Joe say, what people aren't up on, they're down on. And that ties in with just people having a misunderstanding around it. So like referral, when someone says, can you refer me to somebody, or will you refer me to who's one person you could refer me to? My perception is similar to the word selling, similar to the word marketing. People don't lean in, they lean back. So what is a better way, right? Steve Jobs, right? The late Steve Jobs, he was an expert, and Jay is an expert at asking a different question and looking at a different perspective. So my belief on this is simply to look at it with a different set of eyes, a different perspective. Watch what everybody else does and do the opposite. And, for example, in the millennial generation, I think a better way to ask for referrals is who would you nominate? Who could you invite? Who could you recommend? And for example, I know this to be true. There was a company that launched that everybody's heard of. They got 30 million users, and the only way you could get involved in that company was by invitation, and it was Gmail with Google. It was a by invitation only process, right?
I was one of the first ever with a Gmail address, by the way. There was a party, not to brag, but there was a party in New York, and they gave everybody at the party 3 emails, and I got one.
Oh, that's
I just wanted to slide that in.
That's cool.
Was
you're
cool.
Yourself. You're dating yourself now, right? You're a dinosaur.
I know, but it was, at the time when people found out, I thought, it was like, how much do you want for it? I was going to sell them.
Yes. I mean, and you think about the psychology of that, right? They wouldn't let you in unless you got invited, right? So in today's generation, I think, again, going back to what I shared earlier, Paul, which is I think people are smarter today. So if we can all think about our business model, how can we create an experience, A, B, how can we create it in such a way that there is exclusivity to what we do? It isn't for everybody. And let's face it, we can't be all things to all people. So if we start looking at the end in mind, which is a Stephen Covey quote, to begin with the end in mind, and we go, okay, how can I create my business model so I create an experience, but then realize it isn't for everybody, and I actually proactively discuss that, have a conversation around it, and then how do I make it by invitation only like Google has done or many other companies have done, right? Or make it a nomination process. There's great, Harvard, for example, right? You have to be nominated to actually get into, there's a lot of organizations. You have to be nominated to get into the organization, like in Genius Network. We are going to have a higher, deeper look at someone who gets introduced to us or, for practical terms, referred to us or nominated to us in our community versus someone we don't know because of the relationship capital, which is one of the strongest things that all of us can develop in business overall. So here's how I look at the framework. Instead of referral, think of how you can make it by invitation only. And it's a 3-step process. Think of the millennial generation. How can you make your business model cool overall, right? Make it cool. So you can go into the psychology. I'm thinking of the psychology. Is it cool to refer people? Well, it is cool to profit in a business because that's our responsibility as the entrepreneur, the business owner, even for our shareholders or stakeholders in the company, of course, and our team members. But the other side of it is it cool to the consumer? Maybe not. So how could we make it more cool? So instead of referral, I challenge people to use by invitation or by nomination or by introduction. So make it cool. Number 2 is make it easy, right? If you're going to refer somebody, how can you make it easy? Well, Gmail did it by having an automated way you can invite someone. Hotmail did it years ago. They used to have the PS. Paul, do you remember the PS? It said, I love you.
Oh, yeah.
Try Hotmail for free.
Yeah.
All of us could put a strategy like that in our business of some kind, but my whole point of that is it makes it easy for someone. They don't have to think of, like, how many times have you been to a party, Paul, or I've been to a party together, or, an event, and we meet someone and, oh, my God, that person would be great for so-and-so.
Sure.
But then what happens is we're like, oh, God, what do I actually say to them? Who do I do? Do I introduce them to their, executive assistant? Do I send them to their website? Where do I send them? Right? Get all this stuff in our head. So how can you, as the business owner, make it easy from a psychology point of view as someone walking into the line, paying a couple cents, for a coffee and walking out and sitting down in the area and having just a cool experience? So make it cool, make it easy, and then make it fun. And those 3 simple strategies, as crazy as it sounds, if people would look at their, call it referral model, or now maybe the new terminology, the invitation model, I believe that simple framework or paradigm would transform most people's business in the next decade.
Dan, I began the show by saying you're one of the coolest guys I know. I want to talk about your show. It brings inspiration, transformation, leadership from top experts in the world, growth to freedom, growthtofreedom.com. Tell us about the show.
Real simply, we bring some of the top experts in, Paul, as you mentioned, to really it's conversation. I created the show in one way to leave a legacy for my kids. Right.
And
I wanted to have these conversations.
I'm sorry, let me interject for a second, because when you told me about the show, you called me up one day and you were, we were sort of picking each other's brains. And I said, why are you doing the show? And tell me, tell the audience what you told me when I said, because I've been doing shows for 25 plus years. I've been in this, broadcast and new media business for a very long time. But your answer impressed me more than anyone else's. And I've asked that question many times. Why did you start your show?
Number one reason, Paul, was because, when I was in that hospital 2 weeks after my son was born, I realized I had done some interesting things, built a lot of companies, to a certain level of success, which along with that, there's a certain level of failure. And I believe that our greatest success comes from failure. And then I looked at it and said, okay, if that happened, what would I have been leaving my kids? And frankly, other than maybe, certain financial means or other things that go along with that, I look at my intellectual property and go, wow, I don't know that I would have really captured the essence of what I would want them to have known of their dad. And so I created the show because I wanted to leave a footprint, a thumbprint, or lack of better words, of a legacy for my son Kyler and my daughter Kira, that in 10 years from now, as we build up this content base, this intellectual property, they'll see their dad in a certain light, but then have access to some of the best wisdom in the world. And instead of me talking, it's one thing to theorize and talk about it. It's another thing to show them by example. And I believe, people ask me all the time, what is leadership or thought leader? What is a thought leader, right? And, I've heard this frequently, like thought leader and all kinds of, my real simple idea of thought leader, we're all thought leaders. Because at our core, I think, now maybe some people don't fit what the description I'm going to give, and that's fine, but I see everybody this way. All a thought leader is thoughtful leadership. And for me, that starts at home. Leadership is as leadership does. And so I want to show my kids, the power of networking, the power of association that we all have heard before. Jay talks about, you talk about it in the show, you bring experts on your show. And for me, I wanted them to see their dad having the ability to go get access to some of the top minds in the world and how accessible it could be if you just thought a little bit differently about it. How do you add value to these people's lives first to then create an opportunity for the relationship? So that was number one. Number two, Paul, what I found about myself, or what I find about myself, is that I love to learn. I shared that a little bit earlier, that in many ways I see myself as a mini Joe from a learning perspective. So for me, having the opportunity to do these interviews, right? You do these and you're one of the best at it. Like, you get in these conversations with people, you learn from those interviews, don't you? Right?
The thing is, Dan, people don't realize this. They hear TV, or they watch TV and they hear the radio and they listen to podcasts, and sure, there's people out there who get paid for this kind of stuff, but Jay and I don't get paid for this show. You don't get paid for your show. We do it. Jay calls it adding value. I call it, giving back. we do it because we have a passion to help, do we not?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's that strategic byproduct, right, of getting paid from a psychological point of view. And for me, Paul, what it does is it puts me in this hyper learning experience. So like to kind of give a framework of every show I do at least 2, sometimes up to 4 hours of hyper research. And, I'll go listen to, like 5 interviews that someone's done because I want to jump into an interview with a little deeper perspective, because they can go get superficial interview questions from anybody. But I'll go in and I'll start asking them about, like, what would your wife say, right? Or what would you want to have your kids say about this thing that you've done, or this, strategy you're an expert known for, right? And I like to go deeper into some of more of the personal side. And I do that not just because of me or my family, because I want my kids to learn from that. What would you say to your kids if you were starting over? So anyway, it puts me in this hyper-learning phase, this hyper-learning stage. It's the best platform I know of. And the payoff psychologically for me are, an exponential growth. Dan Sullivan, he has this 25-year question. He says, is this something that you could do for the next 25 years? And for me, the answer, like you said, whether I got paid or not, directly or indirectly, for me, having those conversations with bright, smart, incredibly wise people in all kinds of areas of business, that answer for me is yes, which is why I decided to start and restart the show.
You know what, Dan? We're going to wrap, but I'm going to pay you what I think is the ultimate compliment. You ready?
Yes, thank you.
You are a great dad.
Thank you.
I really mean that. I got goosebumps when you told me back in the day, whenever that was, that you were doing a new show because you wanted to leave a legacy for your children. I thought those children have a great father. And I'd like to end on that note, if you don't mind. So geniusnetworkevents.com, just like it sounds, geniusnetworkevents with an S.com. Jay and I highly recommend Genius Network. Our last 3 Ultimate Entrepreneur programs, we've spoken about Genius Network. That's how much we love what you all do. Joe Polish, ilovemarketing.com, an amazing podcast. And our good friend Dan Kuschell, his program, growth2freedom.com, GROWTH2TO, freedom, FREEDOM.com. You're a cool guy. You're a great dad. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks for listening to this episode of growth2freedom.com. Are you struggling to get a steady flow of new clients every day? Or maybe hit a plateau or hit a wall in growing your business? Well, let's help you solve this problem today. Let's review your business and have a conversation. You can do that for free today at breakthroughstrategycall.com. That's breakthroughstrategycall.com. In addition, if you're looking for a simple way to implement some of what we've been talking about in today's episode, then I want to encourage you to get our free small business toolkit. You can get that at activate.breakthrough3x.com. That's activate.breakthrough3x.com. If you'd like access to the special resources and all the show notes for this special episode, make sure to visit growth2freedom.com.